Good afternoon and welcome to Hanoi. Just arrived here from Saigon, and one of the things I noticed that's very different about these two cities is that you can actually walk here in Hanoi. Despite the fact that it's pretty congested and intense like Saigon, there's still quite a lot of places you can walk. And so this afternoon we're going to take a walk around some of my favourite little trails of the city, and this little walk we're going to include, we're starting here at the 1886 St. Joseph's Cathedral in the centre of town, and we're going to go into an area that's known as the French Quarter. This church is a pretty good place to start actually, because it's in the centre of an area where the Catholic Church had a massive land holding. It really shows you how huge the church's land holdings were in the middle of Hanoi in the late 19th century, and right up until the communists' takeover in 1954. You wouldn't be giving either Saigon or Hanoi major points for walkability, but as I said earlier, Hanoi is definitely a much more walker-friendly city. The other thing that stands out about Hanoi is that the built heritage is holding up much better in Hanoi than Saigon. One pretty interesting development in Hanoi is the seeming takeover of the city by this Tom Cafe chain. So it's a cafe chain, Vietnam's kind of Starbucks, I guess. And every time I come here, they've acquired another piece of land. And they've got both sides of this kind of downtown block. So Tom Cafe is really taking over Hanoi. One of the reasons Hanoi is a much more walk-friendly city than Saigon is that it still has a lot of public space. There are lots of huge parks, and there are places like this in the middle of the city where motorcycles are forbidden. And this is actually the old, I think it's the old Archbishop's residence in the centre of Hanoi. It's now a library, but it's all part of this incredible real estate that the church owned in the centre of Hanoi. And of course the church's role in French colonialism is something that's worth noting as well, because the French used the protection of Catholics as one of the pretexts for their interventions in Vietnam in the 19th century. In the middle of central Hanoi, you still have these little places of great calm as well. This is an old temple, but it's right opposite Hoan Kiem Lake, which is probably the most popular walking spot of the city. But these places also add to the kind of uniqueness and the kind of connection with the past in Hanoi that unfortunately is increasingly hard to find down south in Saigon. And we're going to cross the road here and head over to Hoan Kiem Lake, which is probably Hanoi's most famous, well, definitely Hanoi's most famous public space, walking space, and you know, many would describe it as the heart of the city. The crowds are just starting to arrive here at Hoan Kiem Lake this afternoon. It's especially hot today, so I suspect they'll be a little later in coming, and it's quieter here than normal as well, just because it's so hot. I wrote a lot about the regrettable destruction of French colonial era architecture around Vietnam, but it needs to be pointed out that the French themselves were appalling in their destruction of Vietnamese heritage in the late 19th century. And this structure here on the bank of the Hoan Kiem Lake is a reminder of that. Apparently in its day this was a huge pagoda that the French decided to destroy, and there are many other examples of French destruction of Vietnamese heritage during the colonial period as well.
Things feel a little bit more relaxed than what you mean, like the cars and
The Metropole Hotel is the nicest historic hotel in Vietnam. Lovely building at the heart of the French Quarter area, and it's very popular for wedding photography as well. Very complicated stuff, huh? And a very important Frenchman once sat or stood on top of this monument, but he's since been removed. I mentioned before that Hanoi's architecture is one of the really interesting parts of the city, and the building over there, the old government guest house, it's one of the more special pieces of colonial architecture, but there's lots of special colonial architecture in this part of town. And then a more recent structure, which is now the State Bank of Vietnam building, right opposite here. I'm going to head deeper into this French Quarter area. We're heading up now to the Opera House, which is probably the most photographed of Vietnam's French colonial buildings. This is the Vietnamese History Museum. An outstanding piece of colonial era architecture it is. Pretty sure this one is also from a guy called Ernst Hebrard, I think. I have to double check that. But yeah, definitely one of Hanoi's more memorable pieces of colonial architecture. As you can see, it combines both French and local styles, and it marks a particular period in the architectural evolution of French colonial times. And but it's a museum that's well worth visiting as well. It's probably the best collection of historical material dating back to the very founding of Vietnamese civilization 4,000 years ago.
That's one room for 3 nights. What's we do?
This is nice. I've never had a chance to walk around these grounds before, but this has long been one of my favourite colonial buildings in Hanoi, and it's another one of these buildings that there's plenty of Asian influence in the architecture as well. How incredible is this place? Just extraordinary. This is the old Pasteur Institute. Check out this incredible frangipani tree. The guard just tells me that these 2 trees date back to the creation or the construction of this building back in 1926, 90 years ago.